We are now proceeding to the launch of the African Sustainable Development Report in our next session, which will be moderated by Ms. Boto Kebabonye Bayendi, the Director in the Office of Strategic Planning and Delivery from the African Union Commission. If she could join us here, very pleased to have her to lead the next session on behalf of the African Union Commission. And once again, thank you to all the panelists. I won't take the time to summarize because we are short on time. And I look forward very much to hearing the messages also from the ministers who will be speaking in this next session. And Boto, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Oli, for handing over to me at this critical time where we are to be getting a session of launching the Africa Sustainable Development Report. Unfortunately, at a point where energy levels are low and the room is almost getting empty. But I take this to be a very vital session. Excellencies, allow me to stand in the already established protocol. And as introduced, I am Kebabonye Bayendi, Director in the Office of Strategic Planning and Delivery in the African Union Commission, responsible for Agenda 2063 and aligning Africa to other strategies, including also the SDGs. I believe today marks a very important trajectory for us. Allow me to share, or maybe to state a metaphor that we are at critical points. We reflect or we imagine that the success of any athletic competition is a factor of a good start and a good finish. A good start and a good finish that requires unique skills, unique competencies that will keep both the athlete and the coach awake at night. I'm saying this because we are at an intersection of two vital points. The last 5 years of the UN SDGs, which is a finishing point, and the first years of the second decade of Agenda 2063, which was launched by the Assembly of Heads of States in 2024. So this is basically the Africa Sustainable Development Report, the second one after the launch of the second 10-year. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to say that Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030, as the Deputy Chairperson had said, are not competing, but let me define the line of sight that should be established as we report on both. Agenda 2030 is the global strategy. Agenda 2063 is the continental strategy that is programmed around 7 aspirations and 7 moonshots that covers all themes of the SDGs. I want us to underline that as member states, we commit to the citizens of Africa through the sub-national strategies, the national strategies, that when we implement, the results are experienced by our citizenry, the AU in Addis Ababa and the UN in New York are just monitoring the dashboard and facilitating us to please and to deliver the commitments to our citizens, as articulated in the dashboards of both agendas. Therefore, the line of sight should be established and should be emphasized. Allow me to use the previous conversation as an example to say that Agenda 2063, for instance, Aspiration 6, that has to deliver to us in 2033 the checkpoint and African citizens who is more empowered and more productive. I want to assure the Minister that the productivity gap being talked about is in the granular implementation at specific at continental level. And if we do exactly what he was suggesting to close the gap, we will deliver the SDG, the relevant SDG accordingly. Ladies and gentlemen, therefore, before I call in the panel and introduce them, in the interest of time, the expectation, therefore, is for us to be focusing on the sense of urgency. I would like to quote that during the 11th session of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, convened in Kampala, Uganda, we have underscored both the urgency and magnitude of our development commitments, which is in line with the theme of the second decade of implementing Agenda 2063. We dub it the decade of acceleration, because in the first 10 years not much was achieved, but the potential remained. Ladies and gentlemen, this session is therefore an opportunity for us to review the policies, the strategies, the frameworks, the tools that would be very vital in terms of stating the baseline where we are, if we are to deliver the perfect start and the perfect finish and become like a successful athlete. The unexploited Africa potential and the positive traits that we see in the report should not be underscored. We have all to put our heads on the deck towards the Africa we want. In my panel, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Ms. Asaita D, Deputy Director of the Regional Bureau of Africa, United Nations Development Programme, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Excellencies. Thank you, good afternoon, everyone. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends, it's a pleasure to join you in this Africa Day, which is a tradition at the HLPL. It's a space where we reflect, recalibrate, and reaffirm our shared commitment to Africa's development journey. This year's theme couldn't be more urgent and more relevant, as we just heard during this previous session, as Africa stands at a defining crossroad with major shifts in the global context and multilateral world. Over the last decade, we have witnessed progress, innovation, and resilience. Yes, yet still too many people are being left behind. The promise of the SDGs and Agenda 2063 is not yet a lived reality for many, especially for youth, women, and those working hard in the informal economy. The data that we have in this report tells us that only 19% of vulnerable Africans have access to basic issues of protection, compared to a global average of around 53%. Furthermore, Africa spends just 3.7% of its GDP on social protection, excluding health care, lower than the global average of nearly 13%. The report also shows that over 25% of Africa's youth, aged 16 to 35, our brightest hope and the future of the continent, are neither in education, employment, nor training. Of deep concern is that more than half of the continent's workforce remains engaged in vulnerable employment characterized by self-employment and unpaid family labor. We must therefore face these facts hands-on, because behind each number, there is a dream whispered. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, participants, we also know that Africa's greatest asset is its people, their creativity, their tenacity, and their drive. At UNDP, we are committed to being a partner that helps unlock that potential by promoting innovative and integrated approaches that foster inclusive, job-rich growth and sustainable structural transformation. Our inclusive growth agenda is focused on harnessing Africa's abundant natural resources, deepening participation in value chains, and capitalizing on the transformation promise of the Africa continental free trade area. We also are helping governments connect their resources to results through jobs, livelihoods, and shared prosperity. At the heart of our effort in the inclusion of youth and women, in particular through MSMEs, the beating heart of Africa economies. They are the innovators, the risk takers, the builders of tomorrow. MSMEs alone can account over 80% of employment in Africa. To achieve inclusive and sustainable development, we must therefore place them at the center of our interventions. We are also seeing the power of digital innovation. For instance, Timbuktu, one of the flagship UNDP programs, which is a Pan-African initiative, is building the infrastructure for youth entrepreneurship and digital economy. Unipods, our other UNDP innovation pods, based on academic institutions across Africa, are fostering home growth solutions by young Africans for Africa and for the world. But innovation is not alone, is not enough. We must ensure that financial ecosystem works for Africa. This is why we are launching the credit rating support initiative for Africa, supporting countries in improving their engagement and the sovereignty credit rating process for us to improve risk perception and lower the cost of borrowing in global capital markets. Because no country should pay a premium simply for being African. Today's launch of this report on Africa's sustainable development is another important milestone. It gives us critical insights and a mirror to hold up to ourselves. It points to what is working and identifies urgent action needed to accelerate the joint implementation of the Agenda 2030 and also the Agenda 2063. So, Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, as we begin today's discussion, let us hold into the truth. Africa's moment is now, but it must be built together, and we need broader partnership, smarter investment, and a deepened sense of shared responsibility. It is time to move beyond diagnostics of problems and to co-create solutions. The UNDP remains firmly by your side, not only as a development partner, but as an advocate for Africa, for Africa's voice, agency, and future. Let us all seize this moment. Let us turn hope into action. Let us deliver on the promise of dignity, prosperity, and inclusion for all of us. We thank you, Madam Chair, and all participants in Your Excellency, and I wish you all a powerful dialogue and purposeful the outcome. We all have a summary of the report, and everything is really tiny to have it. We are very delighted to join you this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Madam. I'll adopt the previous moderator's approach of not trying to summarize in the interest of time. But I loved your landing. This is time for Africa. We could dance to that song, even in this room, but most of all, you emphasize that let's go beyond diagnostics, which means that action is more critical. Like I had said, we're in the decade of acceleration. Thank you very much. Allow me at this point to welcome my second speaker, which is Dr. Balkis Osman Elasha. Thank you very much.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you for making the time to be here today. It is a privilege for me to join you for this important event. It is with great honor and a profound sense of purpose that I deliver these remarks on behalf of the African Development Bank. As we launch the 2025 Africa Sustainable Development Report, comprehensive statement of continent's remarkable journey towards the 22nd Agenda for Sustainable Development This report consists of a collaborative effort involving the African Union, the National Economic Commission for Africa, UNDP, and the African Development Bank, provides a clear lens into our shared progress and the formidable journey and the challenges that remain. Approaches a critical frontier milestone. It is essential to acknowledge the continent's achievement, such as being the host of 10 out of the 20 fastest growing economies globally, making significant reduction in maternal and child mortality, and implementing successful health campaigns. These accomplishments are a testament to our resilience, innovation, and collective efforts. However, despite these advances, the road ahead remains complex. Climate change manifesting through drought, floods, and rising sea levels to the intensifying vulnerabilities across our continent. Water scarcity, environmental degradation, fragile health systems, conflicts, and socio-economic inequalities continue to hinder our development trajectory. Addressing these issues require urgent coordinated action, and sustained commitment. Over the past decade, the African Development Bank has been a pivotal engine of Africa's transformation. The bank's 5 priorities, the high five, lighting up and boiling Africa, feeding Africa, industrializing Africa, integrating Africa, and improving the quality of life in Africa, has directly impacted the lives of over 565 million people. The bank has invested more than 100 billion US dollars, with more than 50% of which more than 50% allocates to infrastructure, roads, rail, ports, liquid and liquid, health, water and sanitation, fueling economic growth and regional integration. These investments are not just financial commitments by the bank. They are catalysts for sustainable progress, unlocking opportunity for millions of Africans and positioning the continent on the path towards achieving both the 2030 Agenda and Agenda 2063. Of course, regional integration has been especially vital. Through strategic investments in infrastructure supporting the African continental free trade area, the bank is fostering economic cooperation that aims to unlock Africa's vast potential, create millions of jobs, and promote inclusive growth. We believe that regional integration is fundamental to transforming Africa into a more resilient, prosperous, and self-reliant continent. Moving forward, and as we reflect on this report and the collective effort of the past decades, I invite all stakeholders, governments, development partners, private sector, and civil society to renew their commitment to Africa's sustainable development. The African Development Bank stands ready to continue supporting this transformation by investing in our people, infrastructure, and green growth, advocating for global reforms, and fostering innovative financial solutions. Together, through strategic partnership, unwavering determination, and shared vision, we can overcome all the challenges before us and realize Africa's immense potential. A continent that is resilient, inclusive, and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the representative of AFDB in her portfolio of Chief Climate Change and Growth Specialist. She is bringing in a very noble narrative that if we don't shape and foster well, climate change is capable of reversing the gain, the effects of climate change, reversing our developmental gains. And it happens in a drastic way, and it happens in instances where some economies that are not so well diversified, it kills the whole, maybe agricultural sector, and people are left wanting. Thank you very much also for pitching in to articulate the contribution of the African Development Bank in the implementation of what we have coined as flagship projects around infrastructure, around health. They are all over cutting across the 7 aspirations of Agenda 2063. And when they touch there, the SDG moves. There's no way we can touch at continental level and at global levels, the indicators don't move. So thank you very much for your contribution. At this stage, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to welcome the moment where we receive the overview of the 2025 Africa Sustainable Development Report. I believe we have the report and we'll be getting just brief highlights. I encourage the presenter to be very brief. Please go ahead, Mara.
Thank you so much, Director Botho. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I am supposed to be very brief, but I will take 30 seconds to try to energize the room so that you don't fall asleep while I give this analytical report. So can I please ask everybody to stand up? Raise one hand up. Down, please, and the second hand up. All right, down. And can you please say 7%? 83.1%.
83.1%.
And 12. Oh, all right. You may please sit down. Okay. So these are numbers you're going to hear.
Yeah, wait.
Thank you. I got the hard part to give the numbers, and then so. I am Banke Abejiri, and I work with the Economic Commission for Africa, but I'm giving this presentation on behalf of the partners, the United Nations Development Program, the African Development Bank, and as well the African Union. And I'll be focusing on some of the findings of the 2025 Africa Sustainable Development Report. Now, this report is over 200 pages long, so what you're going to hear is really a snippet that would hopefully perk your interest enough to read the whole document and pass it on to other people. My presentation will be in 2 parts. I will give a general overview of the report and then quickly focus on the specific SDGs. In terms of the report, the scope of analysis are the 5 SDGs that are being covered during the high-level political forum. As we all know, the implementation of the SDGs in Agenda 2063 are happening in a difficult context. Yet, we are seeing some progress. Africa is progressing in 12 of the 17 SDGs, but the current pace of progress is not sufficient to achieve the goals by 2030, and a lot of these also apply to Agenda 2063. In terms of the report on the 5 SDGs under consideration, only 46 of the 63 targets are measurable, but only 2 of these targets are on track to be achieved by 2030. Next slide, please. If we look at the continent at a glance, we see through the yellow that we are making progress, but it's not sufficient to reach our goals by 2030. We find that there's a lot of progress on Goal 5 on health, but less so on Goal 3. Goal 5 is less advanced than Goal 3, yes. If you look at decent work, you see that the progress is not so much. And when we look into the sub-regions, we find that it's really only West Africa that is making significant progress on Goal 8. Now, Southern Africa has made the most progress towards Goal 14. Now, moving quickly to the second part and the focus on the SDGs, I'll start with the ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for all ages and associated Agenda 2063 goals. Significant improvements are observed in health and health outcomes over the past 2 decades. Life expectancy has increased by 19.86%, maternal mortality has decreased by 7.4%, while the proportion of births attended by skilled personalities have increased. Significant progress has also been made in the fight against malaria and infectious diseases such as HIV and tuberculosis. However, challenges do exist. Current spending on health amounts to around 7%, one of the numbers you said, and it's well below the target of 15%, which is advised. Climate change and other emerging threats are also weakening health systems in Africa. Next slide, please. But we see that countries are making significant efforts within the healthcare system. South Africa, Nigeria, for example, are working on national health insurance and universal health coverage systems in order to improve the lives and livelihoods of their population. Moving on to gender equality and empowering women, we see increasing representation in public and private offices over the years. 32.7% women representation in managerial positions, higher than 27% globally. Women are holding 26% of parliamentary seats, so there is improvement, but it is still below gender parity. Although if you look at the panel today, you would say that men need to start a revolution now to ask for more parity. Okay, but women's economic empowerment remains low. 68% of women were in vulnerable employment compared to 57% of men. While we have seen progress in addressing violence against women, still about a quarter of women and girls were victims of violence in 2023. When we take a close look at different areas in terms of promoting and enforcing and monitoring legal frameworks, so for example, in violence against women, marriage and family, employment and economic benefits, we see an average achievement of about 63% across all the 4 areas, with employment and economic benefits being the least at 55%. But once again, the report will show you that countries are making significant effort, and we showcase countries like Morocco and Ghana who are taking steps in terms of legal measures to combat gender discrimination and ensuring women's representation in decision-making positions. Moving on to SDG 8 and associated Agenda 2063 goals. Again, there's a lot of opportunities. Africa is estimated to have 12 of the fastest growing economies in 2025, up from 10 in 2024. And unemployment rate is generally low at 6.47%, but is higher than global averages of 4.97%. But the real story is when we look into the details. We see that GDP per capita remains low, ranging on average 0.1% from 2015 to 2023. There's also low output per worker, which was what Dr. Thompson was referring to, and it's below the global average. Informality is high at 83.1% versus 57.9% globally. Youth unemployment also remains a challenge, with youth not in education, employment or training at 23.29%, and 39% of people with disabilities being employed versus 56% without disabilities. Moving on. But again, a lot of success stories, a lot of push. You see Lesotho accelerating job creation, and also Zimbabwe promoting decent work and youth employment. Moving on to life below water. Africa is doing very well in terms of marine biodiversity protection. About 46.7% of our key marine biodiversity areas were protected, slightly higher than the global average. However, marine pollution is increasing 2 million tons of litter entered African beaches in 2022. Is higher than the 1.7 million tons in 2017. And a lot of this litter is coming from land-based sources. When we look at indicators of ocean health, we see some improvements, some of which could be attributed to temporal reductions in industrial and agricultural activities during COVID. Regional cooperation on marine protection is key, but it remains fragmented and most times informal, but there are some promising initiatives. Countries like Egypt, Morocco are taking strides in terms of ensuring that they have coastal and marine management. And finally, when we look at partnerships for sustainable development, foreign direct investment has reduced. It's currently representing only 6% of flows to developing countries. We are facing the constrained fiscal space with debt service as a proportion of exports of goods and services increasing to 9.6% in 2022, but remittances are making bigger impacts on the continent, 3.3% of GDP compared to the global average of 0.8%, with West and North Africa receiving greater volumes. We look at examples of Burkina Faso and Madagascar, for example, that are implementing alternative and innovative financing initiatives. Quickly to the policy recommendations, some of these also stem from extensive discussions with member states during the expert group meeting. Some of them are in the room today. And also the Kampala Declaration. We need to leverage South-South cooperation, invest in skills and education, invest in our youth, mobilize finances and strengthen partnerships. Institutions are key. Data infrastructure is a necessity, and we need to invest in improving and collecting, disseminating data for SDGs and Agenda 2063. The report also has specific recommendations for each of the SDGs. They are well highlighted there. I could tell them to you, but I wouldn't, so that you go to read the report. And yes, if you have any questions, please do send them to us. We'll be happy to answer all your questions. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the presenter. I was saying to her, not so bad, in terms of the strength through the highlights of this year's Sustainable Africa Sustainable Development Report. And I believe that is a moment where we are getting the reaction of the panel. I have -1 in my panel list. There is Honorable Edgar Moyo, Minister of Public Service, Labor and Social Welfare, the Republic of Zimbabwe. Honorable Minister, allow me to usher you with a very specific question and to reflect on the earlier metaphor that now that we agree we are at the starting and the finishing point, and we have had the baseline as to where we are, we have had the gap in implementation. Now the key question is, overall, to all panelists, be geared to share with us the policies, the plans, the strategies, the framework, like we are interviewing an athlete, hoping to some extent you are a losing athlete or you are a winning athlete to some extent. So share with us the joy of winning and be also open to us what we can do better. Allow me to pitch as thus: how can policies, programs be tailored to advance SDG 3, good health and well-being, and SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, and aligning with Agenda 2063, a vision of inclusive growth? And also, in your response, Honorable Minister, what role can social protection systems and labor market reforms play in addressing the current challenges, including challenges around the youth, unemployment, inequalities, in supporting both agendas, the experiences of Zimbabwe? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, President Emila. It's an honor to join you today as you launch the 2025 Africa Sustainable Development Report and reflect on our shared commitment to 2030 agenda and the Agenda 2063. I would like to share perspectives and point of view of public service led by social welfare and portfolio that advocates for people's dignity, economic resilience, and inclusive growth. Chair, Zimbabwe, like many other countries, is confronted by challenges, one of which includes youth unemployment. By way of illustration, the average percentage of youth who are not in education, employment, or training stands at 49.5%. Other challenges relate to informalization of the economy, productivity in small and medium enterprises, and external shocks, which includes pandemics, climate crisis, geopolitical instability, and international coercive measures. That in these persistent challenges, Zimbabwe is forging ahead with decisive policies aimed at transforming the country to an upper middle income economy, and in the process, attain the Sustainable Development Goals. Through the National Development Strategy 1, my government is working on large-scale job creation with a deliberate focus on youth and women. Through the National Youth Empowerment Strategy and Youth Employment and Entrepreneurship Projects, we are creating green jobs and promoting entrepreneurship through access to finance. We are also finalizing the Zimbabwe National Employment Policy, which prioritizes labor-intensive growth and digital inclusion. With regards to social protection, we are moving beyond its classification as a safety net. Rather, we view it as a foundation upon which resilient societies are built. We have expanded the harmonized social cash transfer program, reaching the most vulnerable segments of society, including child-headed households, persons with disabilities, and the elderly. Furthermore, we are strengthening response systems to respond to external shocks such as natural disasters and economic disruptions. In addition, our National Social Security Agency, which we call NASA, is introducing innovative policies, one of which is extending coverage to workers in the informal sector, who now constitute a significant percentage of the labor force. On the labor front, the Labor Act was reviewed with more forward-looking provisions on worker protection, collective bargaining, and gender equality in employment policies. We're also simplifying business and labor registration to encourage formalization of the informal sector, particularly for MSMEs, which form the backbone of our economy. These reforms are not just policies, they are tools for reducing inequality, protecting livelihoods, and enabling people to participate meaningfully in sustainable development. I wish at this juncture to briefly share some of our lessons and good practices. First, we adopted a whole-of-government approach to SDG implementation, coordinated through the national SDG clusters, chaired by respective ministers, including mine. This has improved coherence between national and global development priorities. Second, the National Social Protection Policy Framework has laid a solid foundation for integrated people-centered service delivery. Third, our National Human Segments Policy integrates employment, climate adaptation, and urban-rural equity. Fourth, partnerships with the private sector and development partners have enabled innovation, green jobs, digital training, and inclusive financing models. Pilot projects are now being scaled up for wider national incomes. This year's Africa Sustainable Development Report presents both a sobering assessment and a call to action. At the midpoint of the 2030 agenda, we are not on track to meet the SDGs. There is need to turbocharge the implementation through a combination of robust domestic interventions and international partnerships anchored on firm governance. Africa must continue advocating for the reform of the international financial architecture, access to concessional financing, and deeper cooperation grounded in African priorities. Zimbabwe stands ready to play its part. We reaffirm our commitment to the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals and to Agenda 2063, ensuring that no one is left behind. Together, Let us turn this decade into a decade of delivery and transformation, I think.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. The humility of acknowledging that in our posture where we are, we may not achieve as much as we need by 2030 is really appreciated. But you went on to do exactly what I asked for. What are the new policies, strategies, examples from Zimbabwe? We really appreciate that. Would like to go straight into the next panelist, introducing them as His Excellency Ambassador Charles Masole, permanent representative of Botswana to the UN. Honorable Masole, you are looking at me as if I could speak our native language. We seem to be coming from the same country. He's scaring me with his eyes to say, Usika. In our native, to say, don't ask me difficult questions. Is not. I would like you to focus or dwell on the experiences around SDG 5. To say that what are the most pressing challenges for women in contributing to and benefiting from progress on these agendas, particularly in sectors like agriculture, education, and formal employment. How can governments and partners better target interventions to address these gaps? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to also start by thanking the African Union Commission, UMMOCA, UNECA, VLVP, and our partners for continuing this timely dialogue. Tonally affirms its commitment to SDG path and the gender dimensions of Agenda 2063, recognizing that gender equality is not only a goal, but a catalyst for all other developing outcomes or development outcomes. We want to analyze and that one of the greatest accelerators for Africa or Africa's economic transformation will be the inclusion of women and youth. The Africa Sustainable Development Report shows that by harnessing technology and digital tools, ensuring access to education and skills, as well as access to inclusive financing, we can achieve the transformation we need and move to deliver more sustainable value chains. I want to highlight some opportunities and challenges in a few sectors that we have listed. In agriculture, women in Botswana are central to agriculture. To fully empower their productive capacity, we must address access to finance, land, and climate resilient technologies. Education sector. Botswana has achieved near gender parity in primary and secondary education. Women and girls outperform their male counterparts in literacy markers. However, girls remain underrepresented in STEM fields, technical training. We are also conscious of the rates represented by gender-based violence and other factors, which can disrupt educational pathways for many girls. In the formal employment and the role of social protection, there is an opportunity to improve participation of women in both the public and the private sectors. Their participation in the private sector is often constrained by care responsibilities and informal work conditions. Appropriate social protection system being pursued by the government can allow us to build resilience, encourage more economic mobility for some of the recent initiatives. Allied with the recommendations of the Africa Sustainable Development Report, Botswana is rolling out gender-responsive budget across all ministries to ensure that public spending addresses gender disparity. We also continue to invest in women-led entrepreneurship in the agricultural sector. while investing in increasing STEM or access to STEM education and digital technologies. And based on our discussion, allow me to highlight some key recommendations and interventions. One, scale up access to finance and land for women in agriculture, including through cooperatives and climate-smart subsidies. Two, invest in STEM education and digital skills for girls and young women prepared for future work. Three, expand social protection for informal workers, especially women in caregiving roles. Four, strengthen data systems to check gender outcomes and inform policy, including disaggregated data on violence, employment, and education. Five, streamline gender across all government ministries with gender-responsive budgeting. And six, close the economic and political gaps by promoting women's leadership and enforcing equal pay and anti-discrimination laws. Finally, Ovana believes that empowering women is not just a moral imperative, but an economic and social necessity. We call on all our partners to join us in building a future where every woman and girl can thrive and peak. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Excellency. You reminded me that beyond the achievements, there is one that I would like to highlight from Zimbabwe and from Botswana that aligns to what we can be as Africa. Remember, the vision of Agenda 2063 is an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the global arena. This vision highlights that we don't only care about what we do, we also care about our brand, how the globe look at us, and we are working towards that. In the global arena, from Zimbabwe, Africa achieved the first president of the International Olympic Committee, former Minister of Sports, also a woman and also very young. Round of applause for that. In the global arena, Botswana achieved the first short sprint gold Olympic medal in France. So I know a lot about sports, that's my passion. We really, on a more serious note from the Agenda 2063 perspective, are saying that the underlying part of us being seen as a force to reckon in the global arena calls for us to care about the brand of Africa. And in our measurements, there are some achievements that last in the global media for one day. They are positive, they last for one day. When they are negative, they last for a year. So we need to change the narrative and the trajectory by influencing what is being reported about Africa and amplifying it from where we sit. So let us know about our continent and do as Bukubaili is doing. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce the next speaker, who is Ms. Dima Al-Hatib, and the founder and CEO of Sof Lanati, youth-led NGO, a science diplomat, a mechanical engineer, a researcher, an artist, a poet, who is actually what when Botswana presented that women are less represented in STEM. Let's hear her out at this point.
So thank you, first of all, for providing me this opportunity. And today I'm representing the United Nations Youth Office as body. And to answer the question on how can investments in skills, education, and digitalization has called for 2025 ESDR, empower young people to contribute to SDG 8, and the agenda, of course, so 2063, the goal of empowered citizens, and actually what can be done based on policy to empower the youth, and what do they need from governments to overcome barriers to their full participation in ensuring environmental sustainability with regards to SDG 14, life at the water. Well, I think the tone of the conversation will be a bit more different because I speak on behalf of a grassroots movement, which is called Soldanatia, and which is based in Mauritius. We work at the intersection of ocean conservation, community knowledge, and science-based advocacy, but also in cultural organisms, in words mainly with regards to the decolonization of our internet shapes, meaning language, the way we define ourselves, our relationship with nature, our relationship with community, Ubuntu, and which was fully ecocentric compared to the anthropocentric values, which was partially imposed by colonialism. So it is also about reclaiming this deep sense of sovereignty when we're speaking of Africa, to reclaim its roots, to reclaim back, and to lead, not just to be part of a leading committee. So with regards to this, one perspective is, and one initiative is the Big Ocean State Initiative with regards to small island developing states. So we're talking to call ourselves small islands, but deep ocean states in a decolonial lens. You guys are very fantastic. I'm not a fantastic person, but with all I listen. And we must know to advance SDG 14, it is essential to ensure environmental sustainability. But we must know also that the 2025 Africa Sustainable Development Report is very clear that without urgent investment in education, skills, and digital access, the continent's youth dividend risks becoming a missed opportunity. The Nobel Prize-winning economist James Hecksman research proves that every $1 invested in quality early childhood programs can yield returns between $4 to $16. And to advance with regards to environmental sustainability, we have to recognize the sectoral role of Africa and its youth, not just as beneficiaries, but as knowledge holders, innovators, and leaders. William Kamwamba invention on a windmill to power his village in Malawi is a very great example of how this young man, William, and there is this Netflix documentary, The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. It is a vivid reminder of what transformative energy solutions that emerge from youth-led action. So we have to understand that right now, grassroots initiatives are confronting with a very big problem with regards to some lack of transparency. I'm sorry for the honesty. The Greek Climate Fund, for instance, is there and mostly funded by countries who are not really affected by the problem. But many grassroots do not really see where the funding goes. And evidence shows from the OECD and the IIED reports that less than 2% of climate finance currently reaches youth or community-led organizations directly. And over 80% of conservation funding for Africa is still managed by institutions based outside of the continent and mostly the global north. So they come with not fully suitable, non-local solutions to local problems. Local problems, foreign experts, foreign leaderships, global profit. But we are not really against foreign collaboration. We are against exclusion. What we are against is building Africa without Africans in the leadership table. And against deciding for us without our matters fully at the table. This reveals an opportunity to move from participation to co-creation, which everyone here agreed on before. And where young people and Africans also, not so young people, where everyone and local experts are meaningfully involved from the earliest stages of policy design and program development, not just at implementation stages. So talking about experts is essential to decolonize science as well, because as promising ancient knowledge system, indigenous knowledge system, they were ecocentric sciences way before, which are now working. So it is essential to recognize those forms of sciences. So to support this shift, I will just enumerate 2 key priorities based on policy support. So governments should establish formal youth advisory roles within marine and environmental ministries, ensuring continuity and not just a consultation. And national frameworks can also be considered popularizing and supporting youth-led, community-based conservation efforts. But more importantly, the programmatic support, partners and donors should create a more accessible and flexible funding mechanism where Africans are not just involved as we see, so innovative solutions, but we are part of leading the solutions at the table, where we combine tools like ancient knowledge systems, ancient sciences, African philosophies, to contribute to problems that we are encountering as Africans. To end, by creating an inclusive, well-resourced and trusted-based framework, we can enable young people to contribute fully to the marine protection with regards to the SDG, and also to their own development in the future. I ask not only for us to be implementing the solutions, I ask us for us to be the solutions. And as solution builders, we should be clear. Let us lead and give us the tool to do so in our own decolonized legs manner. Let us be part of a solution as African leaders.
Thank you very much for the very passionate submission. An assurance to you is that when I say that in the immediate, in the continental strategy that has been developed top-down and bottom-up from the global strategy, we commit that as at 2063, we need an Africa whose development is people-driven, relying on the potential of African people, especially its women and youth. But what would we look at that we're on the right track? In 2033, at the end of the second decade, we would want African citizens that are more empowered and more productive. The articulation you've just submitted to us, especially when you linked to the generic of Africa, say to us, what kind of values had worked for us as Africans? Have we preserved them thus far? They define our uniqueness and they need to be leveraged. So thank you very much for that issue of we need to formalize youth advisory roles. That's very critical. It always takes us away from the reality if we consider that if we are saying the Africa that is driven by its own citizens, and its own citizens are 60% youth. Are they really driving? Our policies allowing them to drive? That is why I thank you very much for your recommendation. I believe, you're ready? Or should I skip you again? Let me not skip you again and formally introduce you as Ms. Tema Al-Hati, Director, UN Office for South-South Cooperation. Got you. And your question is that, what strategic roles can the UN Office of South-South Cooperation and UN partners play in achieving Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2063? What can be done to broaden opportunities and channels for greater South-South cooperation in support of African member states? Thank you very much. Your chance, please.
Thank you very much for this very pertinent question. Allow me first to thank all the organizers for this timely discussion, but also for inviting the Human Relations Office for South-South Cooperation to engage with you on this. But also, I'd like to commend the report and the first key recommendation on leveraging solidarity through South-South cooperation. I think this is extremely important. And as the UN entities that is entrusted with the mandate to elevate and facilitate and support South-South cooperation within and beyond the UN, we and the development partners that we work with, we are committed to leverage this cooperation to advance both agendas in support of African member states. And also important to note that with just 5 years for the 2030 agenda completion and the 30-year and second 30-year action plan or Agenda 2063 underway, as pointed out also by the report, Africa is facing monthly identical crisis, compounding addressing vulnerabilities across the continent. And 10% of measurable SDG targets on track, South and triangular cooperation are more crucial than ever. With the reference to questions, let me direct your goals to the potential ways that the UN Office for South-South Cooperation and the UN system have been playing and will be playing a central role in support of developing countries to harness South-South and triangular cooperation as a development cooperation modality that complements the ongoing traditional ways of development cooperation, but to also tap into the Southern-led actions and solutions in the development trajectory. First, South-South and triangular cooperation can enable and facilitate strategic, context-specific support to build the crucial capacities. And here, let me shed the light on 3 points. Africa is rich in natural resources, but needs stronger capacities to harness them for priorities like depth, sustainability, and investing in infrastructure, skills, and jobs, especially for the raw youth, as we just heard, can drive national and regional prosperity by implementing ambitious framework like the AFCFTA. And South-South and triangular cooperation can play a vital role in building the capacities needed to realize this potential. Second, context-specific demand-driven knowledge exchange is central to South-South and triangular cooperation, and consequently, our office devotes a lot of effort to develop and strengthen South-South and triangular cooperation capacities within the UN system and among the member states to drive open. We have also been developing digital tools and instruments that allow this process to move forward. I'd like to underpin here our digital platform, the South-South Galaxy, that has hundreds of examples of solutions from the global south and access to potential partners. Also, with our interaction with all the UN system, the expertise that lies within the UN system can definitely be leveraged further to support South-South and triangular cooperation and anchor this in the country program documents. Second, through intergovernmental mechanisms such as the UN High-Level Committee for South-South Cooperation, which is the highest policy-making body on South-South cooperation to the UN, and this office, the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, is providing secretarial support for this committee. It is currently presented like Africa, and on behalf of the African group, it's Morocco that is presiding this stage. And this is an important vehicle to address the different resolutions, to address the different outcome documents, to address the different conventions that are particular to Africa and different development challenges in Africa. For example, so far, some 39 resolutions in P24 alone have integrated and anchored South-South and triangular cooperation as part of the way forward. And most recently is the Compromiso de Sevilla of Financing for Development, whereby South-South and triangular cooperation is boldly mentioned as a means for peer-to-peer learning on the welfare partnership. On a third point, I'd like to also mention that through the collaboration with the UN regional entities, we can also collaboratively drive strategic and catalytic support, including cross-regional South-South and triangular cooperation to advance regional priorities. This must be we must elevate, proven southern-led solutions, making them accessible and scalable where they can have real impact. It's not only about funding, it's also about building the capacities to access, adapt, and implement catalytic interventions. And yeah, let me stop it here, but let me know if you have other questions on that.
Thank you very much. We wish we could have some form of opportunity for clarity. We will do that outside the session, especially in aspects of capacity building, in aspects where you rightly said that the South-South cooperation is a means or it's a leverage point. If we need to accelerate, sometimes you don't need to reinvent. Contextualizing could be quicker than starting from scratch. So we look at that potential in terms of how it can be leveraged to accelerate the implementation or the last lap of the SDGs and the first lap of the second 10-year implementation. I believe we have had a long evening going towards my last speaker, Ms. Naomi Nokolo. You in the room? Yes. Thank you very much. Executive Director, Global Compact, Country Network Nigeria, representing the private sector. And your question is more on the private sector being vital for advancing sustainable consumption, value-added manufacturing, and renewable energy, and catalytic areas for both Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030. What actions can the private sector take to accelerate the implementation of the two agendas with a focus on job creation, SDG 8, and financing for development, SDG 17? What policy enablers in terms of incentives, maybe regulatory frameworks, do we need as governments to attract long-term investment in Africa's sustainable development? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished participants, colleagues, and development partners. Let me start by thanking you all for your efforts in the launch of the AFR report and for inviting the United Nations Global Compact System to be here. I am pleased to speak on this very critical topic, the role of the private sector in advancing sustainable consumption, value-added manufacturing, and renewable energy across Africa. Three catalytic areas that are fundamental not only to our prosperity, but also to our planet. As we edge closer to 2030, both the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the African Union's Agenda 2063 reminds us that time is of the essence. The stakes are really high, and we must outdo ourselves. And our actions must be strategic, coordinated, and inclusive. I must begin by emphasizing the fact we all acknowledge but often under-leverage, that the private sector is indispensable in the pursuit of sustainable development. At the just concluded financing for the development conference we had in Sevilla, it was established as always that across the continent, and particularly in Nigeria, the sheer scale of challenges, youth unemployment, inequality, climate vulnerability, and weak access to finance demand that businesses step forward, not merely as economic actors, but as solution drivers. In Nigeria today, over 60% of the population is under the age of 25. This youthful demographic offers immense potential, but only if we are intentional about creating dignified future 50 jobs. The formal economy cannot absorb everyone, especially when there are issues of the ease of doing business. So we must look beyond traditional employment models and start creating entrepreneurial ecosystems that empower young people to innovate and lead. These are the United Nations Global Compact Network Nigeria. Mobilizing the private sector to advance the SDGs is very central to the pillar of our work. And through initiatives like the Alliance for Youth Nigeria, we work together with companies like Nestle Nigeria, Jopperman, and the Big Godly companies and others to collectively train and equip young Nigerians with vocational, digital, and entrepreneurial skills. This isn't about CSR, it is a smart business initiative. We are actively building the pipeline of tomorrow's workforce by fostering inclusive prosperity today. But skills alone are not enough. If the goal is to accelerate job creation and sustainable financing, the private sector must also commit to local value creation. That is investing in local supply chain, supporting SMEs, and embracing sustainable consumption and production patterns. Instead of importing everything, we must build what we consume and consume what we build. Nigeria's small businesses, millions of them, are ready, but they need access to finance, fair procurement opportunities, and meaningful mentorship. That is why on the issue of policy enablers, we believe that policy support is very critical. Governments across Africa must enact enabling frameworks that reward integrity, innovation, and sustainability. This means we need to look at targeted tax incentives for youth hiring and skill development, preferential procurement for compliant SMEs, and simpler regulatory processes that allow small enterprises to thrive. It also means that governments must de-risk green and impact investments so that private capital can flow into the various sectors we need to grow. For example, renewable energy, circular economy, agro-processing, and affordable housing. The financing challenge remains a central barrier. Africa faces an annual SDG financing gap of over $200 billion, and we know that official development assistance alone will not close it. We need to unlock domestic capital, tap into diaspora bonds, leverage blended finance instruments, and create crowding models where development financial institutions play a catalytic role. The private sector must stop seeing risk where there is untapped opportunity, and governments must stop treating impact investors as outsiders. They are partners in building the Africa that we want. One of the ways we at the UN Global Compact Country Network in Africa is addressing this is by supporting Nigerian companies, for example, the Global Compact Network of Nigeria, in embedding ESG and anti-corruption frameworks into their business models. Earlier this year, we concluded the Nigerian Business Integrity Project under the Siemens Integrity Initiative, using the UN Global Compact Anti-Corruption Collective Action Frameworks to strengthen the governance capacity of companies, large and small. The feedback we received was really powerful. Companies are more likely to sustain anti-corruption practices when rewarded through preferential procurement or market access incentives. We also collaborated with the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria and the Convention on Business Integrity to design and roll out SME corporate governance guidelines. And the objective is to simply ensure that our companies, no matter their size, have the tools to operate responsibly and competitively in both local and international markets. And at the heart of it all, what we are advocating for is a new development compact, one that is not donor-led, but locally driven, not reactive, but proactive. And the private sector must lead with intention, and government must enable this vision. That's why the UN Global Compact Nigeria continues to mobilize CEOs in country. And early this year, we had a roundtable where we introduced the 6 transition purposes of the United Nations as a pathway, as an entry point where private sector can mobilize investments to advance economic growth in Nigeria. So if we are to achieve the 2030 and 2063 agendas, we need to scale what works, public-private partnerships like the Alliance for Youth, we are working, collective action on governance and integrity is working. Women and youth-focused financing platforms are working. We must now amplify and replicate these successes across borders, sectors, and value chain. African development, like other colleagues have stated, will not be written in Geneva or New York where we are KCTech. It will be written by the entrepreneurs, the executives, the policymakers, and the partners in Africa who choose to act today. The private sector must move from the margins to the main stage of development planning. And at the United Nations Global Compact, we at the country networks in Africa remain committed to mobilizing the Africa private sector to invest in the multi-trillion-dollar opportunity found in the SDGs. And through our 10 principles, we make the SDGs as part of the business operations and strategies and the value proposition for the businesses. So through our initiatives like the Africa Business Leaders Coalition, the Global Africa Business Initiative, we continue to galvanize the movement of companies that will create more jobs, improve livelihoods, and accelerate progress on the sustainable development goals. Africa will not develop by chance, dear colleagues, it will develop by design. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Not by chance, by design, intentionality, and to say that we acknowledge no business as usual will take us to the Africa we want. If the Africa we want is not owned by Africans, not only governments, but private sector companies, we will not reach there. So this is a very challenging submission that I believe we've had. Honorable Minister, I'm glad you are in the room, because what you earlier shared, it is now added flavor by the context of private sector being the critical players. And the conversations should be held as to how do we make sure that we give them the policies to leverage and thrive and create the jobs that we want. So thank you very much. At this stage, I believe we are coming to almost concluding. I was having an opportunity for questions and comments, because beyond this, Fatima is not in the room to do the closing remarks. While we call her, I could take one or two questions, and then we would gather here for an official photo. I believe you have your copies of the report that we will be showcasing to say we know the baseline, we know where we are, and we take responsibility in closing the gap. No one will do it for us if it is towards the Africa we want. To our consciousness, the Africa we want is a very radical and threatening Africa to others. So we must achieve or strive to achieve it, knowing that it will not be easy, but we are intentional about achieving the Africa we want, and we are co-creating. No one will come and give us the Africa we want. The photographer, are you here? Yes, please. I would invite us all to the front line with our copies of the report. And then after that, we would be doing the closing statement. Thank you.
See me.
Okay, tell us if our smiles are many.
You've made us smile again.
Let's start with the 1 minute first.
What is recognition 3 here? Let's say cheese, everyone. Let's say.